Hi there. This is Simon and Lauren here for another midweek boost. I hope you guys are having a great day, and we're very excited about what we're doing this month.
We are talking about, through the month of September, sexual intimacy. And what we're even reminding ourselves of as we look through the information is that sexual intimacy is based on the same foundations as emotional intimacy. So whether you are in an intimate relationship or not, these are great tools for basically most relationships.
And I think part of the thing to kind of keep in mind with this is, as we talk about sexual intimacy is not just a physical act. It's actually much more of an emotional act. And so when we think about good sexual experiences, again, there is this pleasure, this physical pleasure. And again, that has a lot of hormonal changes that happen in our body as a result of that. And if you want to learn more, look at the sections we did last month on hormones. But this month, we're focusing on the sexual hormones. So testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. And even though that's the focus of the month, we're actually going to partner that with the fact that if we don't have good emotional intimacy, those hormones can allow for some physical intimacy, but to have the full experience of intimacy, we wanted to include the emotional connection that's important here.
And once again, this month we are reviewing this book, Passionate Marriage by Dr. David Schnarch. And the tagline is Keeping Love and Intimacy Alive in Committed Relationships. We are going to put the link in there for you if you want to order the book. But we're going to do a high-level review with some practical ideas throughout the month of September.
And I think also to remember that we recognize as coaches, as therapists, that intimate relationships are complex. They're not straightforward. And so the things that we're going to talk about this month will be helpful. But if there are other issues that you might be having that are really difficult, consider a therapist, consider a coach, consider additional support for yourself. And again, as you hear this and you have questions, don't be afraid to ask those questions in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear more about what your experiences are. I can tell you that when we did this book, and it's been some time, it really made a huge difference, not only in our sexual relationship, but really in our entire relationship.
The key concept in this book is differentiation. And Dr. Schnarch basically links together the importance of differentiation to emotional connection. And I want to start by reading just one paragraph from this book, and then we'll talk some more about the details of what is differentiation. Differentiation involves balancing two basic life forces: the drive for individuality. I got to say that again. The drive for individuality and the drive for togetherness. Individuality propels us to follow our own directives, to be our own, to create a unique identity. Togetherness pushes us to follow the directives of others, to be part of the group. When these two life forces for individuality and togetherness are expressed in balanced, healthy ways, the result is a meaningful relationship that doesn't deteriorate into emotional fusion. Giving up your individuality to be together is as defeating in the long run as giving up your relationship to maintain your individuality. Either way, you end up being less of a person with less of a relationship.
And we can really identify this with this. This is really part of our story. When we started dating and when we started becoming close and when we started as a couple and when we got engaged, we really felt like in order for us to be close and connected, we had to think the same, we had to be the same, we had to feel the same. And that's that emotional connectedness that gets to the point of unhealth. And so some of the tension that we feel in these relationships is how do I be me? How does Martin be her? But then how do we have a real intimate relationship between us? What we call the space in between us.
Mm-hmm. And this idea of differentiation is I can be me and fully me and I can be intimately connected to you. So and you can be fully you. And this is a very different concept, because we used to think that our togetherness, our connection was like this.
Right.
And now we look at it more like this. I'm fully me, Simon's fully him. And then we have this dynamic relational space in between that we can express desire and passion and longing and our frustrations in a positive, healthy way. We can express all the different range of emotions, but in a way that keeps us connected and safe.
So one of the things that I know we've experienced, and maybe you can identify with this, is this tension of when you have an argument and when you have this time that you want to have together, and you've had this sort of tension between you. It's, I want to be close, but do I have to sacrifice myself in order to be close? And that's the tension that sometimes we might feel, or we might feel like, do I even know who I am in this relationship anymore? Or am I just meeting the expectations of the other person? And we've had to sort of struggle through that. And it's not always fun, but I can tell you, us being in this differentiated place allows us to be much more ourselves. And frankly, we explore our lives together in a very, very different way, because we now don't have to be the same. We don't have to think the same. We can be completely different and still be in a loving, close, intimate relationship.
This author actually gets to the point of saying differentiation is the absolute key to maintaining desire and passion over the long term. It is the key. So let's jump in and talk a little bit more about differentiation.
So when we think again, when we talk about differentiation, we're talking about being our own person. And what we're also saying is that I know who I am. I have a strong sense of self. And having that strong sense of self is actually essential for passionate, intimate relationships. Now, I have to be willing to say, I know all the good, bad, and ugly about myself. It doesn't just mean I'm going to pick and choose, but I can be fully myself. So I have some things in my past that are really ugly and really hard and really hurtful. I also have some qualities that I think are really positive and really that I can bring into this relationship. And so having that strong sense of self can really be a building block for developing the sense of differentiation.
And the idea here is practicing balance of individuality and knowing myself and still being emotionally connected to you. That's that balance in that paragraph that I read. It's this pull to individuality, and it's this push to togetherness.
And we struggle sometimes with trying to figure out where their balance is. And so we're going to talk about some practical tools towards that as well.
You know, it's also making me think of the emotional closeness, the emotional connection. We read another book called Scary Close. And I think a lot of times in our Western culture, this idea of individuality is so emphasized in like so many different arenas. Like we are growing up programmed to think of individuality. And often that can lead to this fear or hesitancy to move into emotional closeness. And so it's good to notice, like, is our relationship more on the emotional fusion where we have to be the same, or is it more like distant because being close and connected is way too scary?
Right. And I think when we think about those different emotions, we're not always conscious of it. We may react to what we're actually feeling without being actually aware of the fact that we're either scared or we have this expectation that we have to be the same. And one of the things that the reason this becomes so important is when we are able to be ourselves and be honest with ourselves, we actually then have a capacity for vulnerability. And if you think about it, sex is where we are the most vulnerable. And so we are going to be in this place of really having this amazing passion and desire in our relationships. Vulnerability is key, but we cannot be vulnerable if we're not differentiated. And so that's why we're talking about differentiation, is because we know that by embracing ourselves, who we are, understanding who we are, and recognizing what we can share in our relationship allows us that space then to be vulnerable.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of a practical example that I would say most couples have probably experienced. But if one person is really interested in a sexual connection at a moment and the other person is not, that can often feel like rejection. And when that happens over and over, the rejection feeling just starts taking over in this area of our relationship. And differentiation would say, I can check in with myself and decide, yeah, do I want a sexual connection right now? Simon can also check in with himself at that moment and decide that. And we would have the ability to safely say to one another, hey, this is where I'm at, this is where I'm at, and we could talk about that and make a plan. And that would be very different from having the flavor or the energy of rejection, because I can own what I'm feeling or what my desire is without like emotionally being tied into like that fear or the rejection. Like when we get hooked in emotionally, that can make a really big difference, and then the fusion can start, or the separation can start.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, because I think part of what we find is, guess what? We're not always in the same place sexually, right? One party might be more ready for a sexual encounter than the other person. And so the question that really comes up is, if I'm being honest with myself and I'm the one who's maybe not in that place, is this something I want to choose to enter into because I care, I love, I want, I desire, even though in the moment I may not have felt that way? I can still make choices around that. I don't have to make it a choice because my partner wants that. That may be part of it, because I love you and I want to be part of that experience. And I can also make this decision based on, you know what, I would like that. I would enjoy that. And there's nothing wrong in that. I think for a long time, for myself, I think it was, am I being selfish because I would like this? And it's actually being very honest with ourselves and saying, yeah, I would like that. And there's nothing wrong with wanting, desiring as well.
And as you were listening to Simon, you might have noticed that he's using a lot of I statements. And this is a super practical thing that you can practice for yourself and with your partner, is talking about yourself. So blame is a form of offloading hurt. When we have felt hurt from past experiences, and we say something like, you always, or you never, and it's pointing the finger at the other person. So to stop doing that, to pull this back and to really notice, okay, what's going on inside of me? I can say something like, I feel, and name the emotion when this happens. So I'm talking about myself instead of pointing the finger. It's a great way to start practicing differentiation.
And we have this almost innate sense of judging other people. So this is a way to stop that. It's really a way to say, hey, I'm going to be responsible for me. And so when I can be responsible for me, now if I can be honest with myself, I feel hurt. I feel rejected. I feel when this happens, not when you did this, it's really when this happened. So an example might be, say I'm approaching Lauren for a sexual encounter and she says something to the fact, yeah, I'm just not interested tonight or at this time. In the past, I can tell you, I would feel very rejected. And so it took me some time to say, I feel rejected when I'm approaching and I don't understand what is the barrier to our encounter at this time. Again, trying to stay away from, well, I am feeling rejected when you always seem to turn away when I'm interested. That is actually a form of offloading hurt. It's blaming, it's offloading my hurt of feeling rejected, rather than creating a space that says, hey, I want you to know where I'm at, because we're in a caring, loving relationship.
And then the emotional fusion with that would be that I would go get hooked in and feel responsible for taking care of Simon's feelings of rejection. So here's the emotional fusion happening. And as we've practiced differentiation, it's owning, we each get to own our own feelings. We each get to own the stories that are coming to our mind, and we get to own our choices and really be empowered to make a choice, knowing that we do influence each other.
Right. And it's okay to be disappointed. It's okay to feel disappointment. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel like, oh, I really wish this could be different. All of those things are normal, and we want to normalize it. We want to be honest about it. And we can just say that. I can say to Martin, oh, I'm really disappointed that we're not going to have the sexual connection right now. And again, I don't have to blame Martin. I just can own the fact that I'm disappointed.
Yeah. So what we're talking about right now, it can be really helpful to take some time of self-reflection. Maybe it's journaling, maybe it's going for a walk and having space and time to process, or continuing to invite mindfulness into everyday moments of really to notice, like, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? And bring that into the sexual arena of, what is my desire? Do I actually want a sexual connection? What are my insecurities? Where do I tend to pull back? So the more self-awareness we can gain, the more clarity in that area, the better we're going to be able to communicate and use those I statements.
As we go through this month, and you'll hear about the variations in our sexual hormones through the course of a period of time, we can start to say things like, I wonder. I can be curious about what might be going on rather than assuming I know what's going on. So, for example, if I'm not feeling like I want a sexual connection and Martin is ready for one, I can say to myself, I'm just not in that space right now. I really would love to cuddle with you. I'd really like to do something different. And so it's not that I'm trying to not be in this connection. It's just my hormones may just not be in that place, and that's okay. And I can be very aware of that.
Another idea for practicing differentiation is to be intentional about investing in something that you simply enjoy or want to do by yourself. The other day I asked Simon, I think, like, hey, do you want to go to the movie? And our son was around, and both the guys were like, no, don't want to go to the movie. And I thought at first, that's a bummer. And then I thought, wait a minute, I could choose to go to the movie by myself.
That's right.
And that would be fine.
Yes.
So like intentionally practicing, noticing, what would I want to do right now? What is one of my hobbies or interests that I want to explore? And it doesn't have to be something that we would both want to do at the exact same time.
Right. And it doesn't mean that if Lauren goes into the movie that somehow she's rejecting time or energy or connection with me. She's making a choice out of her whole self. And I've made a decision out of my whole self. I really am not interested in going to the movie, and that's okay. So part of what we're talking about here is also about how we listen and how we respond to each other as well. So the more that we can practice using these I statements and really owning our own thoughts, our own emotions, and try and remove judgment, we can then actually move into a place of curiosity and empathy, which actually enhances this differentiation, because now we're being real with what we're feeling, what we're thinking, what we're believing, and we're being curious. So now we can be empathetic.
Mm-hmm. Another suggestion in the book is pushing our boundaries. And that doesn't mean we're pushing the other person's boundaries. It means that we're trying to expand our comfort zone in a way. So going a little bit beyond what feels comfortable to us so that we can engage in activities that are going to stretch us. And the purpose of that is really to build up our confidence and to notice our differentiation. I know growing up, when Simon and I met in college, he would often ask, like, well, what do you want to eat for dinner? And I'd be like, I don't know, you pick. And then, Saturday, what do you want to do on our day off? I don't know, you pick. And I was always defaulting to that. And actually, I have a lot of clients who tell me that same thing. They're like, I don't know what I would want. And this is a great way to practice. Like, if I don't know what I would want to eat for dinner, for example, that's a little example. But instead of like defaulting and putting that decision on Simon, I could simply go, well, I'm going to still choose this, even though I don't know if I want it. And I'm going to notice, did I really enjoy eating that roasted chicken? Or did that feel like really mundane and within my comfort zone?
Right. And would I have liked something different?
Mhm.
Right. And think about this even in the sexual arena. We tend to not have real expressive ways of talking about what we want, what we would like, and having a conversation about what's okay and what's in our comfort zone, what's maybe a little outside, but we're willing to engage in. This is how that differentiation stance plays out in sexual activity as well. And so again, we're not talking about pushing ourselves onto people. We're not talking about pain. We're actually talking about a conversation. And most of us don't think about having conversations around sex. We think of it in a very spontaneous fashion, and it can be that. But I can tell you also that having these conversations can actually build a much deeper experience sexually, from a connection, from an intimacy, and from a relationship standpoint. So even talking about it, about where are you at? What would you like? What would you not like? What doesn't feel good? What does feel good? Those kinds of things can actually be really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we wanted to just very clearly say the difference between that emotional fusion and codependency.
Mhm.
Codependency is a pretty common word. A lot of people have heard of it. Doesn't mean everybody always understands it. So we wanted to just highlight this for a minute.
So when we think about codependency is sort of a functional way that we operate. So the way to think about it is, if I'm hurt or I'm sad, then how much am I pulling on Marn for her to make me happy, to take away my pain?
Mm-hmm.
Am I actually using Marn to fill this void inside of me? One of the things and we've talked about this in our relationship, is both. I know for me, I frankly got married because I was afraid of being alone. And so I was pulling on Marn to fill that void of not being lonely, versus being in a relationship that says, hey, I'm a whole person. Marn's a whole person. I really like the two whole people in this relationship, and I want to be part of that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, one key is when you think about codependency, is one person is excessively relying on the other person for their emotional needs, their self-esteem, and their identity. Like these core things about who we are as individuals, if those are really muddy or non-existent, and then we need to pull on somebody else for that. So it's a big piece of codependency, is that excessively relies on.
That this may start, you may be feeling like, oh, I identify with some of this. And if you do, this is informational for you. This is where you can start to make some choices around, how do I move out of that? And it can be really tiring to be in codependent relationships. It can be exhausting, and you can actually build a lot of resentment around it.
Now, the difference of from codependency and this emotional fusion is the enmeshment, or the emotional fusion, really is more around a boundary issue, and where, what's me, what's not me becomes really blurry and unclear.
And this is where we might start feeling guilty or shame around, I don't feel the same way as you do. I'm supposed to feel what you feel. And that's when we're actually starting to blur our individuality, our differentiated selves. Part of it can also happen when we so identify the other person's thoughts, emotions, and needs that I don't even think about my own thoughts, emotions, and needs. I'm only thinking about this other person's and how can I meet them and how can I be there for them, and I'm not really actually thinking about anything that I might be feeling.
I know in the past, we were definitely in this emotional fusion enmeshment place. And if somebody would ask me about me, I would often answer, well, we think this, or we have planned this. And I would just kind of like lump all of,
We were one person.
yeah,
right.
lumping it all together instead of acknowledging, like, well, I would really enjoy going on vacation in California, and letting Simon be able to answer the same question for himself without it having to be the same. And one thing we've done to actually practice as well is to even just simply say, like, I see that differently.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of making it like, will you agree? We agree. Oh, we think about it the same. And we're not threatened by that anymore. We have come to realize and experience we can have that emotional connection without having to be the same.
And to realize that we are individuals. We are very unique as individuals. I can tell you, Marna and I are very, very different people. And we used to not believe that because we were so enmeshed. We needed to be the same to feel like we belong, to feel safe, to feel connected. Now our connection is really based on the fact that we get to be curious and explore what we're thinking, and recognizing that it's not always going to be the same. And that's actually been much, much more enjoyable. Mm-hmm. The other part of enmeshment is that you avoid conflict a lot in enmeshment, because conflict actually is a disruption of the thing that is safe for you, mm-hmm. this thing that is certain for you. And so when you start breaking it apart, it is kind of a messy process, because then conflict does arise. And how do I resolve that in a way that says, I'm okay, you're okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. If you're feeling that, like, if any of this resonates with you, or if you're feeling like, yeah, we are starting to move more in differentiation and it feels scary or messy, feel free to reach out. We have some really great communication and conversation skills that can help through this process, all based on using I statements. And plus, we just are super passionate about relationships, and know that when we have good relationship skills, we can have really life-giving relationships with other people. So if that's intriguing to you, please reach out.
So some things that we want to kind of wrap up with today. One, differentiation is about you as an individual that wants to be in a connected, committed, and intimate relationship. And it doesn't mean that you have to be the same, think the same, believe the same, feel the same at any one single moment. And so there are skills that you can build to develop that. And when you start pulling apart the codependency or enmeshment, even if it's in small ways, it can start to feel very difficult. It can actually bring some tension into the relationship, but I'm going to tell you, it's worth it. The relationship in the long run will actually benefit from it. And when you think about this, again, if we bring this into the arena of, if I can be a whole person with my partner can be a whole person with me, now there's space for us to be honest about what we want, what we desire, and just to think about what that means in the bedroom, in sexual relationships. Now we can have real, honest conversations and actually have a much more passionate place to meet.
Yeah. What we've come to discover is that intimacy is actually expansive. Like, the greater our capacity grows to hold all the different things, really, it feels so much more exciting and joy-filled to say we have space instead of we have to do this.
Right.
Yeah.
So I hope this is helpful. There's a lot of information. Please reach out with questions, thoughts, comments. If you are in a place that you're really hurting and just need some help, please, we encourage you to think about finding a therapist that can help you. Seek some professional help. For us, I can tell you, it took professional help for us to move forward. we knew we're not going to be able to do this by ourselves, and it really was helpful. So again, we recognize that you may be in some very difficult situations, and we don't want you to feel like we don't get that happens. We know it does, and we are here to help, support, but also recognize you might need some other professional help to support you as well. Again, I hope you've enjoyed this session around midweek blues. We are very passionate about this. The next few weeks, we'll be talking about other characteristics within the book. Primarily, we'll be talking about the crucible of intimacy. What does that mean, and what is that? Why is it called a crucible? Because there are a lot of things happening when we think about intimacy. We think we're going to talk about sexual desire and intimacy, and then how do we navigate the challenges and how do we grow through that process? So those are some of the areas we'll be talking about in this month. I will also be doing a couple of videos specifically around some of the physical aspects around the sexual hormones, again, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. This is for both men and women, because guess what, guys? We have progesterone and estrogen in our system too. So I don't want you to think this is just for women. This is for both of us. So great. I hope, again, great to be here with you guys, and we're excited about this month.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.